Hey there, everybody. How you doing? Hang on. Oops. I can see people coming in. Hey, everybody. How you doing? Give me 1 sec. I just gotta. There we go. Pause. Okay. You know what happened yesterday is these meetings are supposed to be recorded automatically, and yesterday, because I'm so blind, I didn't see that I hit the wrong button, and so it didn't record. So I wanted to make that's what I'm doing. I'm making like double sure. Okay, am I recording everything? Because not that yesterday was so brilliant that if it was lost to posterity, it's a big loss. But I like to record them, and there was probably some useful stuff on there. I'm just going to give people a minute to come in. I see a bunch of people come in. Hey, everybody. I'm kind of tired. I had to go back. So here's, while people are coming in, I'll dispense with the BS. But I was in a dilemma today because I dressed very badly for the radio show. I just wore a t-shirt. I just wanted to be comfortable. And I hadn't shaved. So I'm in Washington, D.C., and I get a call to be on RT. Somebody's got to mute themselves. Somebody's unmuted, unless that's me. And so I was dressed badly, and I realized that I might have to ask my wife to like come into DC, get me, then drive me back so I could do the RT appearance. And I was fearing that because it wouldn't go over well. Are you guys hearing the same noise that I'm hearing?
Yes, I'm hearing it.
Yeah, we'll leave it good.
I'm trying to see, the thing I'm trying to figure out whether it's feedback from me. So that's weird. Everyone's hearing it. But anyway, they sent a car for me at RT, so I was like, phew. Okay. So I could come back, change into a good shirt, eat, then get a ride back and do the appearance on RT, which was good. I like being on with Scotty, but we had like 7 minutes to do the piece. And it was all live and everything, so that was nice. The show this morning, I'll tell you about fault lines this morning. I expected to have Lucy Commissar, one of these experts on Bill Browder, on this morning, and we just couldn't book them. Nobody was available, and so I felt like we had Lee Jr. on, who's a guy who comes on sometimes, who's a very positive guy and everything like that, and talks about motivation and positivity. And I like to have those segments because we're a morning radio. This morning, I felt like after Trump's speech last night, after the Democrat response, and the Natalia Veselnitskaya story, and the Manafort story, I felt like people who listen to my radio show wanted to hear that. You know what I mean? Like their interest would be in that primarily, and not motivational, or ketogenic diet or a million other things. So we focused on that this morning. But I will tell anybody, tomorrow morning, 7 o'clock, and don't forget, these are all up on Periscope and they're up on my Twitter feed. So even if you miss the show live, you can watch it during the day if you go back in my feed. We have Lucy Commissar and Alex Craner coming on. Alex Craner wrote literally the book about Grand Deception. And Lucy Commissar is probably the smartest person on the Bill Browder story of anybody. And if you don't know those stories well, these are going to be segments that I think anybody will do. And I'll go back to what I was saying a couple of days ago. These are, if you want to blog about something, these are going to be good interviews to blog about, like whatever. I can think of a million angles, but because here's what we're doing. With both Alex and Lucy, I sent them Kim Strassel's tweets about Browder. And I said, I just want your reaction to what she's saying, because I want to hear, I don't know what they're going to say, but I have a good idea, since I know the material, what they're going to say. But again, this is one of those things where I know it's kind of an obsession of mine, but I really think it's key to understanding the whole Trump-Russia story. I really do believe that. And the Trump-Russia story is the biggest story of the past 2 years, right? That's the #1 story. So sometimes I feel like am I too close to this or am I obsessed? Then I go, no, wait a minute. This is the biggest story in American politics. And when Trump says that it's a bigger scandal than Watergate, or a lot of people say that, he's 100% right. And it's far bigger than people like Kim Strassel understand right now. Because if you're buying into Bill Browder's story, you don't see how he ties into everybody else. So it is something that, like I say, it's a personal obsession of mine in a sense, but I think it's justified. And therefore, I don't feel badly about saying to you, if you're trying to figure out something to write about, blog about, talk about on Twitter, I think it's a good story. And I'm so gratified to see more and more people out there get it. So I don't even have to say, you know what I'm saying? Like, I don't even have, if you've watched on Twitter, a lot of times I don't have to say anything. Like, someone will jump in and they'll attack me and say something, and 3 or 4 of you and will jump in and say exactly what I would have said. Just say, no, Browder didn't do that on this date or whatever. So it's very gratifying. Let's talk about the border wall story. So there was no national state of emergency. The media story right now they're trying to pitch is Trump throws a temper tantrum. And I would watch the media. You're going to see this meme over and over again. Trump's temper tantrum. It's part of the way they try to gaslight Trump. That he left a meeting, that he walked out of a meeting. I didn't go over to the White House today because I was just too busy. Tomorrow, I might try to go over, but I got this meetup that we're doing tomorrow night, so it's tricky for me. I swear to God, here's what it is. When I go to the White House, I know there's the same chance they'll call on me as of me winning Mega Millions. It's about the same percentage chance. So when I go over, I will, since you're here and your friends, I'll let you in on a secret. A lot of why I go over is because it's good for me when I get dressed up and I put on a tie to, even if it's just me in the back of the room and you'll see me doing this. Right? That's the move. That's the reporter move, right? I sort of I look like I'm taking notes.
Right.
And then I kind of nod. That's what I do. Watch me when I do the White House press briefings. Now, by the way, it's not just me. That's what everybody does on that side of the room. I didn't make this up. I wasn't I'm not the first reporter you've seen do that. But I know. I see what people are doing. They're not making notes. Some of them are, I guess. Some are just Instagram. You don't know what they're doing. I swear it's true. So even though I'm not going to get called on, I know that as a reporter, I do 15 hours of radio a week, but it's helpful. I was talking to the Uber driver, the guy who brought me to the RT studio, who drives Anderson Cooper and stuff like that. And so we're just talking about the news business. And I told him this same story. And I said, it's valuable, though, for people to see me on TV. No, I have my glasses away too. I don't like to have my glasses up. And then you put your hand up to pretend you're going to get called on. And then the other problem for me is I'm so blind that this is literally true, that if they call on me, Sarah would have to go, Lee Stranahan, I'm calling on you. Otherwise, I wouldn't be able to see it. I swear to God, this has happened to me. It's always been my fear. Oh, by the way, the other reporters, they're vicious hyenas. And I'm not joking. It's like a hockey game. I've had people elbow me. I've had people push me out. And so I've just learned I stand my ground. I get there early. And I'm not that. I'm a 5'8", right? So I'm not tall. But people are like, I think it should be short guys up front. Like there's a Korean reporter, a woman, very nice. And she's really short. I just let her stand in front of me because it doesn't hurt me. No, other reporters don't think that way. They're in a way you can't tell. And there really is a real camaraderie in the room. So I may go over, but I have no hope of getting called on. So, but I recommend this as a strategy. Oh, by the way, let me talk about that. People ask me sometimes about press passes and stuff. Getting the White House pass a lot of people figured this out about a year and a half ago, I guess, is not that tricky. That's how Cernovich got in and other people got in. It's not really that tricky. There's an email address where you send your info to. The Secret Service runs a check on you. And if you seem legit enough, the White House lets you in. But that has nothing to do with you getting called on, right? And if you don't have a regular, I don't have it with me, but I have a I have a Sputnik badge, which means nothing. It's just a badge. You could print one up at FedEx, right? FedEx Kinko's, right? But it says Sputnik. That's what lets me walk up quicker. But again, it has nothing to do with you getting called on, or you can't sit down. The reason I stand on the side is it's all assigned seating. It's not set by the White House. It's set by the White House Correspondents Association, who throw that big dinner where comedians mock President Trump. You've heard of it. And so that's the White House Correspondents Association, and they really rule the room. The White House determines who can get in. Like, and if the Secret Service says, well, no, you can't get in, you can't get in. But that has nothing to do with who the seating happens to. But the thing that's always surprised me about stuff, and it's a criticism I have of Sarah Sanders, and I do, is that she just calls on, she doesn't have to call on those mainstream reporters. She can call on it whoever she wants to. And when I've been called on, it's been by people like Mick Mulvaney or McMaster, people who didn't know you're not supposed to really call on the people on the side of the room. So when I've asked questions, and I have, it has never been for Sarah, and it might have started to be for Spicer because I'd introduced myself, but then he was out of there like within 2 weeks or after I introduced myself. So that's the way that stuff works if you're interested. But it's very frustrating. It was better when Spicer had the remember the Skype calls they were taking for a while, and they just stopped doing them. I thought those were great. So anyway, that's me talking. Any questions on anything? Just you hit the space bar and I'll let you talk. I hear.
If there's a keyboard.
Nobody? Or somebody?
I'm trying to find a keyboard on mine.
Okay, well, I could hear you there.
Yeah, I'm doing,
No.
I'd like to know if
Like
there's a way
someone's got a dog who's unmuted.
God.
Yeah, hang on 1 second.
Okay.
At least it's not my dog in this case. But sometimes it is. Hang on. I don't know the system well enough to... Wait, hang on.
Let me see if somebody else has a dog.
You know what? There's a mute feature. It sounds like someone figured it out. And I just don't know how to work it. There we go. So yeah, so let's try it there. Okay, so you were saying, so go ahead.
Oh. And now he's muted.
Try hitting the space. You know what? I may have done that.
There we go.
There we go. Someone try? See, there's these little icons here. Hang on 1 second. Hang on. Mute all.
He looks like he's on mobile too. So
Hang on. Okay, I just muted all. Now I'm going to unmute all. Okay, whoever wants to talk, try that.
Oh, good. Yes.
Okay.
This is Jim in Daytona, and I was wanting to know if there is some kind of a graphic that that will help us to put together all of the Browder information and Victoria Nuland and all this other stuff. If we could see it graphically, kind of like with what Epoch News does, Epoch Times, that is.
So two things. Sort of, I'm working on that.
Uh-huh.
I have been working on that. I've been trying to figure out I'm critical of that graphic in a number of ways, but I understand why people like it. The problem is, as a graphic designer, this is a tricky thing to map out. Okay, let me explain why. It's a tricky thing to map out because you got to be able to focus on people, but you got to be able to focus on people at different points in time.
Okay.
So you got a fourth dimension here of time. And the reason why is because I think it's important in understanding the story to go back to Bill Clinton's Oxford days. Then I think it's important to go back to the Clinton administration in Russia, and then to 2016 and so on. And the reason it's useful is because you'll suddenly see that there are people who stretch from Oxford to Bill Clinton to the 2016 election, and to Khodorkovsky as well.
Right.
So if you go back, the two guys are David Satter and Strobe Talbot. Strobe Talbot connects to Cody Shearer, blah, blah, blah. So it becomes this thing of like, do you just lay out what the problem with the Epoch Times graphic was? It was a nice looking graphic in a lot of ways. And I guess what I'm trying to say is I'm critical of it, but I totally understand the problem they've got. The problem is, one of the problems with the Epoch Times graphic was it listed a bunch of people, but it didn't indicate to you who you really need to focus on. Like, it listed somebody who I wouldn't even mention at the same height, and every person had the same amount of biography space.
Right.
And there was no color coding. There's a lot of ways you can do this from a design standpoint. You could make some circles bigger than others to indicate this person's more important, right? Or you could make them red instead of right. You know what I'm saying? There's a zillion ways to do it. Instead, everyone is there. So what it becomes is a string wall with no strings, right? And there were kind of strings, but they left out a lot of stuff. So the problem, so to answer your question,
on my Christmas tree,
I'm working on it, but I'm working on it in some ways you can see in my periscopes where I'll do graphics sometimes and I'll show animated graphics, but in some ways you can't see, which is trying to figure out how to lay this out to people, maybe sequentially. So I say, look, let's start with 5 people you know for sure.
Okay.
Hillary, you know for sure. Soros, you know for sure, right? Now let's branch out from them and see where the connections go and whatever. I'm just giving it a possible approach, but I'm really thinking about it a lot because this is it's such an enormous story. That to fully where I'm at now, and I think a number of people are there, it makes you rethink the last 100 years of American history. There's no other way to put it. When you get into some of the things that Alex Craner's brought up, when you trace back where the Council on Foreign Relations start, when you go backwards, you go, well, where did that start? Well, where did that start? Where did that start? You get back to Cecil Rhodes and the founding of, right? And
all of
Skull and Bones and all this other stuff, which you'd go, which I would love if it had nothing to do with it. It would be so great if I could just go, well, this is so simple. It's these people and they're evil. But when you look at John Kerry's involvement and the fact that Teresa Heinz Kerry funded Brett Kimberlin. Now, is that a coincidence?
I don't think so.
I don't think so, but I can't prove otherwise. But it's in my head. Does that make sense? So I look at the fact that Jonathan Weiner was John Kerry's chief of staff 35 years ago, and he's the Christopher Steele guy. You cannot tell this story accurately without focusing. Jonathan Weiner, if I'm making dots, he's this big.
Yeah, he's huge.
He is the center of this thing, right? At the State Department, brought Christopher Steele in, being updated throughout the summer, is Bill Browder's attorney, is Khodorkovsky's lobbyist, was John Kerry's chief of staff 35 years ago. And I'm not even half done.
Oh, boy.
Connected him with Victoria Nuland, who worked for Strobe Talbot, who was Bill Clinton's roommate at Oxford, all of which I had to confirm. The stuff people don't see about my research is how I'm really skeptical of everything. So I really run down stuff. Like when I read who Bill Clinton's roommate was, I spent 3 hours double, triple confirming, looking at Google Maps of where it would have lived, and contacting David Satter and
Boy, you
asking
went way over the Call of Duty on that.
and asking him about a photo that I found. And David Satter, who was Strobe Talbot's roommate, who works with Kordakovsky, David Satter's still involved, and who worked with Andrei Nekrasov, the director of the Magnitsky Act film. And I asked Andrei, I said, when you talked to David Satter, did he ever, because here's the thing, if anybody here, if you were Bill Clinton's college roommate or knew him in college and you're a Republican, you'd talk about that all the time, wouldn't you? You would just, you'd throw it in casually. You'd go, well, the Bill Clinton that I used to see in a bathrobe making scrambled eggs in the morning, blah, 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 right? And by the way, Strobe Talbot's done that. David Satter went to school, was friends, was close with Bill Clinton. I've never seen an interview where he's gone, when I went to school with Bill Clinton, and I said to Andrei, because he knew David Satter well, I said to him, did he ever mention it to you one time? Never mentioned it to him once. I find that extremely suspicious, but
Sure.
that's just me talking that's my hunch. To me, that's like, well, why would you not mention that?
Right.
It just seems to me human nature would be, that would come out. Oh, by the way, I went to school with Bill Clinton. Like, that's big.
Sure.
Never came up once. So I'm convinced this is where my whole opposition research, my whole controlled opposition theory, this is when I started to really realize what Chuck Ross and Strassel and Gino and everybody, Jordan Chantel, everybody at Breitbart, I started to realize that there are people on the right who totally bought into Browder's story. See, Chuck's interviewed him. And imagine what, again, I like Chuck, but
it's easy to get fooled.
And it's hard to admit you were fooled.
Oh.
The thing I had going for me is I never bought into Browder's story, but I never talked about it. Does that make sense? Like, I just looked at it, and then I really researched it for 3 months, on and off, and then I was like, there's really something here, and then we started getting guests on, and now I'm way down the rabbit hole. But for someone like Chuck, who's interviewed him, that would be having to go back and say, I was actively fooled, and all the stuff I thought about Natalia Veselnitskaya, I guess Alex Jones went off on, someone told me that, was wrong, right? It's the same thing. Alex has the same problem. Alex went off on Natalia Veselnitskaya. Alex does not want to hear about this.
Alex is a great guy.
He doesn't want to hear he's wrong about Natalia. Now, and I don't know Alex that well. I know Alex a little bit. But to his credit, Alex lets me go on his show and talk about whatever I want to. And I go on David Knight's show a lot more than I go on Alex's. And I don't even go on that much, once every month or two.
I followed you over there.
They never censor me. So I don't really care. In other words, I'm not going to pick a fight with Alex over that.
That'd be counterproductive.
Yeah, because I don't, and even the Bongino thing, it sort of has spun a little bit out of control, but it's because of his response. Like, if he hadn't responded the way he had, hey, I don't know what you're talking about, and you're kind of being a dick, Lee, but I'll look into it. Like something like that, we wouldn't be where we are now. But he's tweeting the same thing. I think it's hurting him. I really do. He's got people who are hardcore fans, and
he started off real good.
Yes, and he's likable. I've listened to his podcast. I've said I get it. He's very likable. He makes you feel like he's letting you in on stuff. But then, man, when I read the book, when I looked at his book after this whole shenanigan started, I was just like, wow, this is worse than I thought. And with Kim Strassel yesterday, it's worse than I thought. It's very depressing for me. Because it's people who are good journalists. It's people in a lot of cases who are good journalists and who significant. It's like, I'll be honest. Do you know what I feel like? I feel like I'm telling a lot of people that there's no Santa Claus.
Oh,
And if anybody who's been a parent knows that whole thing sucks. That whole,
yeah.
right? There's no right way. There's no like, hey, maybe my kid won't cry.
I think the people on the right are looking for some kind of an explanation for why the narrative keeps getting changed, and we're on a different paradigm all the time.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's the other thing is that part of it's just I'm very empathetic with people, believe it or not. I may not seem it sometimes, but I'm very empathetic with people because the journey that I've been on, from being a Democrat and writing for the Huffington Post to meeting Andrew Breitbart to being on the right, and now working for Sputnik and genuinely having the freedom. I keep, you'll see if you follow me on Twitter, I say to people, come in to work with me. And it's like a ride-along program. I would love for some journalists to follow me around for a month and get up at 5 in the morning and, go into work with me. Because when I say that, I literally wake up 5:30 in the morning, start listening to the news, get ready, get dressed, get showered, start listening to the news, start figuring out what's going on. There's no contact with any Russian anything. Our boss, Mindia, likes the show so much, and it's working, that he just lets me go in. When I come in, Garland generally doesn't know what's happened the night before. He reads the news. I write my news. He gets the news sent to him, but he doesn't know what's gone on the night before. He and I talk about what we want to do in the show, Eric's book guest. That's it. That's
fantastic.
And I pick the guest and Garland picks the guest. And a lot of times I pick the guest and I say, I want to talk about this or that. And if somebody would follow me in, they'd go, well, this is the worst run propaganda outfit I've ever seen. The Russians are horrible at this. What are they doing? There's no control here. There's no Kalashnikovs. But
No.
that's what my mornings are like. And it's so frustrating because when someone like Dan just go, you run the Russian payroll, it's like,
Oh, that's frustrating.
it's like, oh, yes. Yes, guilty as I said, because I did say it. And I know it's so sad to me because I know it's fooling some people. And I hate to tell people that Dan's lying to them, but I don't know how else to put it. And so it's not fun, though, especially since the people were already, I don't want to overstate this, but yeah, I think you guys will know what I mean. They're already proud of themselves because they figured out the mainstream media is lying to them. Does that make sense? So that's the first level of red pill where you go, okay, wait a minute. I used to think the news was true. Now I don't. So now I follow Dan Bongino and Kim Strassel and Lee Stranahan and Mike Cernovich and these people. And then to find out that some of those people are lying to you, or at least being just as bad journalistically in terms of laziness. And here's the other factor too. And this is 100% a factor in DC. And you should be aware of this if you're thinking about going into journalism. The careerism and the social pressure, right, are intense.
Oh, yeah.
And so as a reporter who says about other, I'm on the right. I could criticize Anderson Cooper or Jim Acosta all day and everyone would be, yay, yay, right? But as soon as I criticize someone for making the same types of errors, to me, there's no difference. I hope that makes sense. To me, if Dan Bongino says something or Anderson Cooper says something, I don't understand why I would go, well, I don't want to say it about Dan because he's on our side. Now, that being said, there are people who I am friendly with. Jack Posobiec is a good example.
Okay.
I try to be less of a dick about it. And I try as a human being, as a Christian also, which again, I kind of suck at, but I try not to do that anyway, and I fail a lot. But with someone like Jack, I might give him a call privately first or shoot him a direct message and go, hey, dude, you're completely wrong on that. Just trust me, you should take that down. But the difference is, Jack, every time I've done that, has never been a dick about it back to me. He's never been like, what do you, da, da, da. Whereas I've had people, and I'm thinking specifically of Patrick Howley at Big League Politics, who I privately pointed out an error he was making. Mm-hmm. And he was he basically told me to go screw myself, and he was running with the story. And I offered him my source. I said, you're wrong about this, and here's the guy to talk to. It's an associate of Joe Arpaio's. Let me put it that way. So it's somebody who Howley definitely knows, who was mentioned in his story. And I was like, but
why doesn't he like this?
Well, because Patrick had a story and somebody had said something, and he referenced a person who I knew. He'd said, I know this because John Smith told me, or whatever, right? Mm-hmm. And I know John Smith. So I called John Smith, who's not John Smith. I called John Smith and I said, what's the deal with this? And he spent a half hour on the phone with me and said, the guy's a psychotic, perpetual liar. And he went through his history with the guy. Now, Patrick's basing a story on what this psychotic, perpetual liar has said, and that used John Smith to vouch for it. So I know the story's false.
Gosh.
And so I contact Patrick.
You tried to help him.
I tried to help him. And he was like, screw you. Seriously, was like, screw you, old man. You're just jealous and I'm running with the story and I'm right. I'm like, don't take my word for it. Go talk to John Smith. Here's his phone number. Screw you, the story stands, and blah, blah, blah. And so I said, okay. And I was going to go work at Big League Politics. I had a standing job offer to go work at Big League Politics. And I just said, there's no possible way I'm working for Patrick or with Patrick or anything. I'm not going to have anything to do with him, because when he was told, and if he'd called the guy, I wouldn't have even been like, right? But at least I called him, I talked to him. I don't believe him. Here's why. Okay. But Patrick was like, no, I don't even want to talk to him. And I'm like, well, why would you not want to? He's quoted in your, basically he's indirectly quoted in your story. And you just told me it's not true. And Patrick would not want to have anything to do with it. And by the way, I'm calling Patrick out. A surprising number of people are like that. Mm-hmm. Matt Boyle is at Breitbart. A surprising number of people are like that, where
I think it's part of the new paradigm that has been, some people might say foisted on us, but I'm happy to see it. All the media is out there saying this is what's going on, and it's a perfect time for indie journalists.
Yeah, I think it is and it isn't. It's tricky because, and I've been saying this for years. I think people are getting really sick of being lied to. And I think the amount of time it takes people to figure out they're being lied to is shrinking. And I use the example of the Kennedy assassination, where from the time of the Kennedy assassination to people were suspicious initially. Mm-hmm. They were worried about a lot of things, like the Warren Commission. Just, hey, how you doing, Ez? I'm doing something. But say hi. Come here. Say hi. That's the rule. Here's Ezra. Yeah, come on. Get. See?
Hi, hey, Ezra. Hello, hey, Ezra.
Ezra he did a very good Pikachu, right?
Yep.
Very good Pikachu earlier. So what I've said is but the amount of time it took people to figure out what was really going on was like 10 or 20 years. People did, what?
When are you done doing that?
Soon. Okay. See, it's the home studio. So it took people like 20 years to figure out certain aspects of it, but then things got quicker. You know, people didn't figure out that the CIA had given LSD to a guy who went out a window in 1953. They didn't figure that out till the 70s, right? And now what I've said is, and it used to be people would never figure stuff out. There'd be scandals and you live in South Dakota in 1892 and stuff's happened in Washington, you'd never hear about it. You just never hear about it. Now people are turning around so quickly that the amount of time for people to realize they've been bullshitted is shorter. And people are realizing it quicker. And you're seeing that. People are like, no. But you got to give them a better alternative. And so people have now largely, you can see they're rejecting the mainstream media. Then they fled to HuffPost and Breitbart. But now they're starting to realize that they've been co-opted too. And I see that. A lot of people are starting to realize it. But where do they go? So Alex? I don't know. People kind of realize Alex is wrong on stuff all the time too. And even people who are Alex fans, and by the way, I'm one, but I'm realistic about it. And I don't think anybody who's a real Alex fan.
Nobody's perfect.
Yeah. And they know that Alex is sloppy sometimes. You know what I mean? Dramatic.
Well, when I see his blood vessels pop out on his neck, I know he's about to make a boo-boo.
He overstates things. But to his credit, the dude knows a lot.
Yes, he does.
And has experienced a lot, and he's more sane than crazy, but the parts that he really knows makes him sound crazy, because as soon as people hear people talking about the Council on Foreign Relations and Carroll Quigley and blah, 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 and all that stuff, right? I know what he's talking about. I know he knows what he's talking about, but most people, they go, what's he talking
all
about?
Out there somewhere.
Makes no sense whatsoever. And so, but like I say, so it's always tricky. You know, you're dealing with this careerism all the time, where I just described it. Do I want to piss off Alex, for instance? No, I don't want to piss off Alex. Why? Because I have access to the platform, and I like that. So sure. I said this to friends of mine. I may have said this publicly. If Bongino had said, or Strassel, or any of these people. See, Tucker, I respect. Tucker had to do this a few years ago. Someone was working for him who wrote a column critical of Fox News for their stand on immigration, okay? And posted the column. And Tucker came in and said, you can't criticize Fox. I have a contract with Fox. And one thing I don't really allow at the Caller, because he was running the Daily Caller at the time, is for people to go after Fox, because that's biting the hand that feeds me. And the writer, which, by the way, Tucker didn't BS. He just came right out and said, I work for Fox. There's no criticism of them. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Then the writer said, that's fine. I quit, which is the right thing to do from his perspective. Wow. And Tucker said, no hard feelings. And that's it. And that's what you do. That's what adults do. Yeah. So if Bongino had come forward and said, look, I work for Fox. Fox is a big fan of Bill Browder's, and I'm leaving it there. I wouldn't me personally, I wouldn't push that, because people do have to eat. Does that make sense?
Sure.
And we talked about on the radio this morning, Garland and I talked about this. What if tonight Russia shot down an American plane and pilots were killed, and it was completely Russia's fault and Putin had made the call? Okay? That would put me in a bad position as an American, right?
Yeah.
And I've said, I don't think I would quit over it, but I'll tell you where I would quit. If they came in and told me, you can't talk about it, this is what you need to say, that's the line.
I'm out of here.
I would be out of there right away. But on the other hand, I wouldn't BS for him. I wouldn't go, well, Putin was awesome and he did the right thing. I might not talk about it as much. Or I might go, I didn't think that was a good call. Does that make sense? Like,
that's
I might
a good
not.
Option.
I probably wouldn't. I'll be honest. I would not pile in on it, particularly if other media were covering it, and which they would be, right? But we talked about that. I get that. And by the way, I wouldn't expect anybody, when people sometimes, they were like it when I was working at Breitbart, I didn't attack Breitbart when I was working at Breitbart. I was critical sometimes, but I didn't attack them. Why? Because I worked at Breitbart. And some people be like, well, why aren't you critical of this or that? I'm like, I didn't write the article. Some article, Nolte or Milo or Ben Shapiro or somebody wrote, I'd be like, that has nothing to do with me. And I'm not going to attack another writer at Breitbart. I didn't even attack Shapiro at the time, who was horrible. I didn't even attack Shapiro at the time because we worked for Breitbart. And so it's the same thing. Like, I don't attack other hosts. I don't listen to other shows on Fault Lines because the people who host them are communists. And I'm not. And I know I'd find a ton of stuff to criticize.
Right.
But that's not, if somebody else wants to do it, that's fine. But I'm not going to pile in on like, oh, I was listening to Eugene's show and he said this or that. I don't agree with about Black Lives Matter. And the great thing is the communists who work at Sputniks, Eugene and Brian, who, by the way, nice guys, very smart too. But they don't come in and try to get me banned because I like Trump. You see what I'm saying? So we've sort of got a mutual respect thing where they have me on their show and we talk about stuff we agree on. Mm-hmm. And so if Bongino had approached it differently, I would have approached it very differently. And I just think he approached it in a way that showed me, it confirmed my worst fears, which is, do you know what his problem with me is? It's that I work for Russia. And for some reason, he accepts, literally, this is what his problem is with me. He thinks it's sufficient. And if you think that, then next stop is Trump impeachment. Because here's the thing. Trump is a guy who looked around at Russia and said, I don't see what the problem, like, we should be able to get along.
Yeah.
And do you know who agreed with him? Like everybody. Everybody. Barack Obama in 2012, right?
That's why people voted for him.
That's right. And it's and so I see what's happened as when I say propaganda, I feel that the country's living under propaganda right now, where they've had an enemy that people really feel strongly about. People really feel Putin's like the worst guy in the world, like Hitler. And they don't even know why. And they sort of say, well, Syria. And I'm like, well, he's on the side of the Christians in Syria. You know that, right? And they don't know it. And so's Assad, right? And they're like, no, I didn't know that. No. And even on areas like Israel, for instance, Putin's not anti-Israel. He's just practical. He deals with Netanyahu, right? And I'm mixed on Israel. Putin's less mixed than I am on it, in the same way Trump is. They both deal with Netanyahu the way they deal with him. But it's like I say, people can't. It's very hard to pigeonhole where Putin is foreign policy wise, because it's not in the paradigm that most Americans are used to thinking of, which is, well, if you're friends with Iran, how can you be friends with Israel? That doesn't compute here, but he does it. Putin is able to deal with Netanyahu and with Ahmadinejad. Yes.
Well, I think that's why they were so freaked out at the Putin Trump summit, because Trump has the same inclinations to work with everybody. You can even see his graciousness toward Pelosi and Schumer in his speech. He said, I can see why these rich people want to have walls, because and one of his best lines of his whole speech was, they want to have walls because they care about it's not so much, they don't hate the people they want to stop from coming in. It's that they love the people who are in. They love the people who are in there. I'm not quoting it correctly.
Yeah, no, right. Yeah. Well, no, and they were freaked, and they were freaked out, and of course the fact that Browder came up in that meeting, and that freaked him out, and it's this establishment that's grown up, and it's not left and it's not right. That's where you get McCain and Hillary Clinton McCain and Obama both supporting Khodorkovsky, which to me was the one that was, I think, where everything flipped for me. When I'm like, where I'm completely like, okay, I'm living in the Twilight Zone now. It's an episode of Black Mirror where suddenly I realized that everything I thought, if you watch Black Mirror, everything I thought up to this point just completely flipped around. Because I'm suddenly like, well, wait, here's McCain and Obama both supporting this Russian who no one's heard of, on the record in 2006, and nobody's written about it. Still, nobody's ever written about that. And you'd think if you're the laziest reporter just covering I didn't cover 2008 as a reporter. I was doing comedy. But how hard would it be to go, Barack Obama's a senator, and he hadn't been a senator for that long. McCain's a senator. I wonder what bills they co-sponsored. That'd be an interesting story. Right? It's kind of obvious. And nobody's ever written that story. And that's when it flipped for me. I'm like, oh my God.
That was a serious, red pill.
Yes, it's crazy. And then when you look into Khodorkovsky money, and you go, well, and then his connections to the Carlyle Group and the Bushes, and the Rothschilds, it's all right there. And that's why I bring up some of this stuff. But see, that's the tricky thing. So you asked about a graphic. Part of it could be to go, here's the Genie Energy Board.
Okay.
See to do a graphic, here's what you need to be able to do. It almost can't be a print graphic. It's almost got to be animated or interactive. So you can go, let's pop on this person. Let's click on Bill Richardson on the Genie Energy Board and go, okay, Bill Richardson, he's the old governor of New Mexico. Okay, I sort of know who he is. You click on it, then you go, well, wait a minute. He's on this board, but he's also part of APCO Worldwide, and that connects him to Jonathan Weiner, which connects him to Khodorkovsky and blah, blah, blah. Then you go back and you go, okay, well, wait a minute. Who else is on the board? Dick Cheney. Let's click on Dick Cheney. Wait, there's Victoria Nuland, worked for Dick Cheney. Victoria Nuland's married to Robert Kagan. Victoria Nuland was the person that Christopher Steele was updating. Oh, and she works with Jonathan Weiner. Okay, gee, that's the second time Weiner's name's come up. You see what I'm saying? You'd almost have to be able to click on it. So after the 8th person you click, you go,
oh, I see.
Oh, I see. Jonathan Weiner's everywhere, and so's Victoria Nuland, and all of these people. What do they have in common? Ukraine and Russia. They were connected to Russia in the 90s, and blah blah blah. And then you go, well, Cheney, but he's a Republican. Oh no. Then you go, well, he was friends with Robert Kagan at the Project for a New American Century, and blah blah blah. And you almost have to do it that way. And so there's now that's easy for me to say. I've been trying to figure out how to do it technically for a while.
Mm-hmm.
Like, how do you do that? And the answer is
kind of a video or a picture leads to another picture, which leads to another picture.
Yes. But how do you do that? How do you, I can conceive it in my mind, but then see, you also sort of need another layer so it's tricky. That's why this VR thing that I'm doing, that I mentioned a couple months ago to people, this museum idea I'm having, I think that might be a good way to do it. The biggest problem is when you've got somebody who's been propagandized, and because you got to remember the other story that I know a lot about is the Black Panthers and the radical movements in the 60s and 70s.
Yeah, I watched those periscopes that you put up.
And particularly their connections to people like the Patty Hearst kidnapping and to cults. They're all connected to cults, literal cults. And Jim Jones, the Jonestown, they're connected to, he was the San Francisco
I watched your documentary about that.
Housing Board.
Very interesting, yeah.
And that's a tip of the iceberg. So I know a lot about like the Symbionese Liberation Army and Patty Hearst. And I've had very mixed feelings about Patty Hearst. She was kidnapped and she was brainwashed, and they raped her. They put her in a closet and they sexually assaulted her, and they held guns to her and said they were going to kill her. Now, all of that being said, she also was the daughter of wealth and kind of leaning left anyway because of the time and where she was socially. Okay. And so I think while I'm sympathetic to all the stuff that she went through in that sense, I also think part of her liked dressing up as Tanya and robbing banks and, Power to the People. I really do. I've seen I've seen some level of enthusiasm in what she was doing that goes beyond mere brainwashing to me. Now, I'm not a psychologist, but I just go, she seemed to be sort of liking it. But I don't, to me, it's not either or. It was both. She was a victim who liked it at a certain point.
Exactly.
And it twisted her synapses in some way.
Mhm.
And, but how do you take someone like that? How do you take someone who's brainwashed, who's a Mooney or something like that, and get them out of brainwashing?
Wow.
And I've seen it with a lot of, I've had my first wife, my ex-wife, is real liberal, really liberal. And we spent some time together a couple of years ago. And I had to kind of de-brainwash her just so we could have normal conversations.
Mhm.
I couldn't even talk. I was working for Breitbart. She knew it. And Breitbart was very helpful to us. And she knew that too. So she kind of had to cognitively go, but Breitbart evil. Why they helping Lee? Breitbart evil does not compute. Does not even smoke start come out of her ears. And just so we'd have normal conversations, I had to be like, well, you do know that you said this thing. You do know that Margaret Sanger from Planned Parenthood was an actual like racist, right? So you and she's like, no, I didn't know that. And then I'd show her something, and she'd go, oh my God. She'd go, oh my God, that's the woman who founded Planned Parenthood. That's shocking. But she just never read it before.
That's beautiful when they see it.
Yeah, it is, but it's tricky too because she can't tell her friends. What's she gonna do? What's she gonna do?
Oh.
Hey, I was talking to my husband, my ex-husband who works for Breitbart, and he pointed out something because
You wouldn't get far with that.
Because I had the same reaction when I first heard about it. And the thing that did it for me was Andrew Breitbart told me, we were talking about Michelle Bachmann, one of the first conversations I had with Andrew when I was on the left still. And he said, it was the first conversation I had with him. I asked him who he liked for politicians. He said, I don't know, I like Steve King. And he said, I don't like many politicians. He's like, I like Steve King personally. I like Michelle Bachmann. I think they're real, blah, blah, blah. And I was like, I was on the left. I was like, but those are crazy people. Those are crazy. Andrew, I liked you so far, Andrew, but those people are insane. And he said, did you know Michelle Bachmann has adopted like 16 children? And I said, what? And he said, did you know Michelle Bachmann has like 5 kids of her own, and she and her husband have adopted like 16 foster kids,
Right.
most of whom are minorities? And I said, what are you talking about? He said, look it up. She did. He said, why do you think you don't know that? And I said, because it makes her sound like a decent human being. That's what I said to Andrew. I read specifically, I was like, because it makes her sound like a decent human being. He's like, exactly. He's like, go look it up. Don't take my word. Go look it up yourself. Sure enough, after I got off the phone, I looked it up. I'm like, and then I asked every liberal friend, which was all my friends, everyone I knew. I said to them, did you know Michelle Bachmann's adopted 16 foster kids in addition to having like 5 kids of her own and blah, blah, blah? And they were like, no, but her husband's gay or whatever. It's like that kind of thing. And I'm like, well, that's kind of a weird thing for you to focus on, but okay, because you're liberal, so you shouldn't care.
Right.
But nobody knew. Nobody knew. And so that was that feeling. But it's hard to do that. And like I say to conservatives now, it's like, well, did you know that the company that got the money from Uranium One, because you're blaming it, was connected to Jonathan Weiner and Khodorkovsky? And they're like, what? What? And it's the same reaction because they believe a Fox News narrative about Uranium One. And it's very, very hard that I'm the guy saying there's no Santa. But anyway, speaking of, I shouldn't have said that. Hi, Ezra, there's a Santa. You know that, right? Here. Yes. I'm going to be done right now. Okay, Ezra.
Thank you, Connie.
Show everybody the.
Oh, that's cool.
That's the Ezra puppet. Okay. Is that your voice? Okay, good. Okay, everybody.
Oh, Lee, before you go, I sent you a private message in the chat.
Okay, I'll check it, Connie. Thanks very much, everybody. Talk to you later. Love you guys.
God bless you, Lee. Thank you.
I want to figure out how to end this.
Thank you.